Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Retirement Compass, brought to you by the team of Stonebridge Wealth Systems. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and joining me in the studio is the co-founder, Tim Kulhanek, and partner, Jeremy Gove. We've got a great show for you today. The title of today's episode is Don't Try This at Home, all about your RMDs. You're going to want to stay with us to find out what we're talking about here, because it's a problem that a lot of retirees are facing and they aren't even aware of it. So stay tuned. We're going to provide some solutions for you as well. Tim, Jeremy, so great to be here with both of you this week. How are you?
Doing great. Pleasure to be back with you.
Wonderful. Thanks. And Jeremy, things are going well for you?
Yes. Looking forward to another show this week. So,
I know. It's exciting. With time flies. We've been working together now for 2 years. Hard to believe that, right?
Very hard to believe.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Time flies when you're having fun,
that
for
does
sure.
Indeed. Yeah.
Well, today's show was inspired by a recent conversation that I had. You know, a lot of times when I meet with friends, they ask me what it's like to be with you guys and to work on this show. And I was, sharing some of the topics that we discuss. And my friend is 65 years old. Her husband is 70. And they started in turn asking me some questions about their financial life. So of course I asked questions of them. And one of the things I said is, well, you guys really need to start planning ahead for your RMDs. And they looked at me and said, what are those? And here's what blew my mind, guys, is they've been working with another financial advisor at a big corporate firm for many years. And they said to me, our advisors never mentioned this. We've never heard this term. What are you talking about? Now, jokingly, I have heard RMDs can stand for really mean and dastardly, or retirement mass destruction. That's not what they stand for. So Jeremy, let me start with you. Define what RMDs are for our viewers.
So an RMD is required minimum distribution, and it's something that the IRS will make you start taking when you achieve a certain age. Mm-hmm. So an RMD is something that we have to take from accounts that we haven't paid tax on. So the tax deferred accounts like SEP IRAs, 401ks, all of those traditional retirement plans that we're saving money in.
Yes, and whether you need the money or not, they require you to start taking it out, right?
That's right.
And paying the tax on that money. So Tim, why are RMDs so critical, and what do our viewers need to understand about them?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that if you have a retirement account, for our viewers out there, think about what you have at work. You have a 401k, a 403b, a 401a, a 457 plan. Maybe you work for the federal government. It's a thrift savings plan. It's like the government version of a 401k. All of those are going to have attached to them a required minimum distribution. And for the vast majority of folks we work with, even if they have, let's say they have $800,000 saved in a workplace-based retirement plan, I mean, most of the time, what do you see, Jeremy? It's almost all pre-tax money?
Almost always, yeah.
Almost always. So it's going to have a required minimum distribution. The very nature of the word, it's this tax-deferred paradigm is later. You're deferring a portion of your salary. It's not really a deduction. So many times people put money in a 401k and they think they're getting a tax deduction.
Right.
No, a tax deduction is if I give money to my church and I itemize my deductions, or if I have healthcare expenses above and beyond a certain level, I'm going to get a deduction for that. An HSA would be a deduction because it's money that never comes back to me.
Into that health savings account.
Health savings account, no RMDs, that sort of thing. A 401k, that's not a deduction, it's a deferral. It's a salary deferral. You're deferring it to a future point, and eventually the government's going to force you to take that money out. Like Jeremy said, if you don't plan for it properly, I mean, again, I don't know about you, Jeremy, but I found that your story about Bill and Ellie, that's very, very common. So many times people have excuse me, I was having a conversation at Christmas time with my uncle, Craig, and I was explaining to him how, he'd worked for the state of Nebraska.
Right.
And I explained that, hey, eventually they're going to force you to take that money out, which led to, a deeper conversation, because so many times people are just not informed of this information that it's really critical and going to have a major impact on their tax bill eventually.
Yes, and we're going to get into this throughout today's show. The reason why we're calling this Don't Try This at Home is that the rules are incredibly horrific, incredibly complex, and if you get things wrong, there can be additional penalties that you could be assessed, and we don't want you to fall into those traps. So we'll get to that throughout today's show. But let's just start with the basics, because it is very confusing. The good news is the team of Stonebridge Wealth Systems, this is what you do for folks every day. So you're able to simplify it. What is the RMD calculation based on?
So it's based on a couple of things. There's actually 4 factors that are taken into consideration. The first one's age, your account value, so how much money you have in that account, your beneficiary's age, and the relationship that you have with your beneficiary. So each beneficiary might have a different relationship. Like if it's your wife, that's going to have some different options. But if there's just some rules tied to that beneficiary's age.
And just to clarify, if it's my husband, right, or somebody's watching it, it's their wife. I'm just messing with you.
I was looking at Tim.
I'm just joking with you. No, we like to have fun on here. All right. So it is based on those 4 things, and we'll get into why that calculation can get so confusing. And here's part of the reason why it's confusing is the rules have changed a lot over the last few years, specifically about when you have to take your first RMD. So Tim, why don't you answer that question for us?
Yeah, it's been, like, the whole thing's very complicated, right? Because, you know, the government oftentimes just can't keep well enough alone. Like, if it wasn't complicated enough, they come in and try to fix things, and it's that old saying, like, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. It makes it really, really difficult to understand what is going on and what applies to me. So we put together a chart. I'm gonna have that pulled up on the screen here to help you understand when your first RMD is going to be due. So depending on when you were born, you know, originally it was 70 and a half. Now, people ask me, well, why was it 70 and a half? Like, what's with the extra 6 months? I don't know. Like,
yeah, you want to meet the clown who wrote that rule, right? Just to make it more confusing. Yes.
And then Secure Act 1.0, if you will, changed it to 72, and that's further been augmented by Secure Act 2.0, which was passed in 2022, which moved it to 73 for most people retiring today. If you're born in 1960 or later, it's age 75. But we talk about the complexity. Really, what it's called is a required beginning date. So your required beginning date is April 1st of the year following the year you attain this age, depending on when you were born. That's when your first RMD is due, but then, as Jeremy's going to talk about, you could potentially have a second RMD. And if you go to the IRS's website, it'll say something to the effect of, you know, to figure the required minimum distribution for 2025, divide your account balance at the end of 24 by the distribution period from the table. This is a distribution period listed next to your age as of your last birthday in 2025 in Table 3 in Appendix B, unless the sole beneficiary of your IRA is your spouse who is more than 10 years younger. In that example, you use the joint and survivor table instead of the uniform lifetime table. It gets so complicated.
I know, I was like, I'm sure people's heads are spinning just hearing you read that. But again, if you go to the IRS website, that's what you're going to see.
It's Greek.
Yeah, so helpful, right?
We're the interpreters, though, so that's the good news.
Right, for sure. Well, and it's interesting with these recent rule changes of delaying the first RMD. I've heard people say, oh, isn't that so nice of them? They delayed it. You know, they don't make me take it out as sooner. No, they did that. It's in their best interest. You want to know why? And you guys can attest to this, right? It's because the government knows that the longer the money sits in that tax-deferred account, the more it's going to grow, which means that first RMD that you pull out, they're going to be able to take an even larger chunk in the form of taxes. Not only that, but now when you pass on that money to your kids, for example, they've done away with that stretch IRA provision. Now your kids have to liquidate that account within the first 10 years. That's a larger tax bill they're going to have to pay.
Yeah, the reality is if you're operating under this tax-deferred paradigm, you're not, I mean, you're the one that's taking all the risk. You're doing all the work. You're taking all the risk. You're paying all the fees, right?
Yep.
And you're growing both your money and the government's at the same time. And so, you know, the question becomes, well, when's the time to plan for this? When should I start thinking about RMDs? Maybe you're out there and you're thinking, well, I'm only in my 50s, and, you know, that doesn't seem that important. It seems a long way off. Later we're going to talk about this, but a huge percentage, over half of Americans, retire before they anticipated they would retire. And at the end of the day, there's a reason why we say it wasn't raining when Noah started building the ark. The time to plan is now. There's no penalty for being over-prepared. What I like to tell folks is, remember, there's basically 2 types of people in this world. There's those that kind of take what life throws at them and act as a passenger in life. And then there's those that take action to change their circumstances to better serve their purposes. This is your opportunity to call the number at your bottom of your screen and do just that.
Wonderful. Well, Tim, Jeremy, I know we've got a lot more to get to, and it gives folks such peace of mind knowing this is the world you operate in every day. You understand how RMDs work. You look after this for your clients. And so again, if this is something that's maybe new to you as well, or you're confused about it, the team of Stonebridge Wealth Systems is here to help and serve you. You don't have to go it alone. That number to call to schedule your complimentary written financial plan is there for you on the bottom of your screen, 866-256-7778. Or if you'd rather connect online, you can simply scan that QR code and that will get you connected as well. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we are going to be sharing with you the 6 most common traps that folks fall into when they try to calculate their RMDs on their own. We don't want you to fall into these same mistakes, so stay with us and you'll learn about those right after this.
You know, if you think about the average American consumer, we don't talk about financial topics very often. And so we spend a lot of time at Stonebridge doing educational seminars and different things that are free of charge. If you're not educated in a topic, how do you make educated decisions? When you're working with a client, you're sitting down with them, They're a little stressed out, but after you go through the process and you really take time to educate them on not only what we're doing for them, but why we're doing it, that really gives them peace of mind, and you can see the weight just kind of drops. And when they leave, I hear all the time,
I really should have done this years ago. But sometimes there's a fear that somebody might try to sell us something. If the things that I can provide, if you don't want, don't need, or can't use those, I've got some good news for you. We're not going to sell them to you. We are fulfilling our fiduciary duty of putting their interests ahead of our own.
As Americans, we strive for better, from a better house to a better career to a better life for our children and grandchildren. Better has become the American way. But when it comes to your retirement, what does better mean to you? More income, a flexible lifestyle, better solutions. Yet a better retirement begins with a better financial plan. To get your complimentary written financial plan, call the number you see here. You only retire once. This is your opportunity to plan for better.
Well, welcome back. You're watching The Retirement Compass, brought to you by the team of Stonebridge Wealth Systems. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, here with both Tim and Jeremy, and today's show is all about RMDs, those required minimum distributions, and why you should not try to tackle these on your own. So that's what we're going to share with you now, is the 6 most common traps that folks fall into when they attempt to handle their RMDs on their own. And there's just so many pitfalls, so many ways it can go wrong. And if you get it wrong, you could be slapped with an additional 25% penalty from the IRS. We don't want that to be you on top of the tax that you already owe, right? Mm-hmm. All right, so trap number 1, this is an interesting one. The rule states, and you mentioned this already, Tim, that deferring your first RMD till April 1st of the year following the year you turn 73. Okay, so that's when the first one is technically due by. Even though that's what the law allows, Jeremy, why is that a trap?
Well, it's a trap because if you think about a lot of RMDs, or a lot of the accounts that people are taking those RMDs from, they could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars potentially. Mm-hmm. And so the RMD that you have to take out, the first time it's right around 4%, mm-hmm. roughly.
The calculation.
Okay. The calculation comes out to be about 4%. So
of the total balance of that account.
Of the total balance of that account. So if I have to take, let's just call it $40,000 on $1 million. Mm-hmm. And I take that in April, mm-hmm. well, that same year, I still have to take my RMD for that year.
By the end of the year.
By the end of the year, by
mm-hmm.
December 31st. So if I add that, 40,000 plus whatever else I'm going to take for this
which is going to be
year,
more than 40 grand because it goes up every year, right?
Exactly. It
yeah.
should be more than 40,000. So you end up with $80,000+ of income mm-hmm. in that same year. So that's the problem. Yes. And so if we don't plan for that, we can create a lot of tax consequences, you know, if you're drawing Social Security, and potentially even create an issue with Medicare,
premiums.
Paying more for Medicare premiums.
Exactly, and I could, inadvertently jack you up into a higher tax bracket. Also, a lot of times folks don't understand the rules. So let's say they defer till April 1st, which again, what's the clown in Washington that wrote that rule? It's like a sick April Fool's joke, right? But you take the first one by April 1st. A lot of people forget to take the second one for that year, and then wham, there's that 25% penalty.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, all right, so that's trap number 1. Trap number 2 is failure to adjust your RMDs if you're still working. This is another interesting one.
Yeah, so there's a lot of, I'll call them sticky rules about this, but if you're still working and your employer's plan allows that. Mm-hmm. Now, so the rule of thumb is you can't own more than 5% of the company. So if, if you're self-employed, that could be a problem. But I don't have to take an RMD if my plan allows me not to do that, mm-hmm. as long as I'm still working. But here's the problem. If I have my retirement plan at work mm-hmm. and I have another IRA or maybe old 401ks, mm-hmm. I still have to take an RMD from those accounts.
From each one.
From each one.
Yes.
And so if it's a bunch of a bunch of IRAs, I can add those together mm-hmm. to come up with the RMD and take it from one IRA.
Right, you can aggregate, right?
I can aggregate them, but if I have a bunch of 401ks, mm-hmm. and I was looking this up before the show, the average American sticks with their same job for 3.9 years. Mm. So if you think about working over 40 years, mm-hmm. you could potentially have 10 or more 401ks that you need to, aggregate together. On a 401k, it works a little differently because we have to take that out of that 401k or each individual 401k. Mm-hmm.
So it gets really messy really quickly. And I think, too, the problem is even if you take the right amount, but you take it from the wrong account, guess what? The IRS is going to say, wham, there's that 25% penalty again.
Yeah, and so there's another, I guess we'll kind of throw this out there as an bonus information for those watching. So let's say that I retire December 31st.
Okay.
So I retire, what does the rule say? The rule says I have to take an RMD.
April 1st of the year, following year you retire.
The following year I retire. So by retiring December 31st, I could automatically force myself to have to take 2 RMDs that next year, because how am I going to take an RMD from my account December 31st?
Right.
Probably not going to happen, right?
Yep.
So there's some tricks into that we're talking about the tax traps. That could be a trap, and that's almost one that you're setting for yourself because you're deciding to retire December 31st.
Right.
Instead of January 1st.
So January 1st.
Just retire one day later, and you have avoided the double RMD.
Yes, so smart. A lot of people don't even realize that that's an option, right?
Yeah.
or why that would be a benefit to delay by just one day. All right, trap number 3, failure to use the account value as of the prior December 31st in the calculation. This is something that also trips a lot of people up.
Yeah, so this just has to do with like the DIY approach is, do you know what the rules are and you know where to look? There's different ways you can get that. You could look at your end of year statement. A lot of people, what they'll look at is what's called Form 5498, which is sent out by the custodian that holds the assets. So like in an IRA, a lot of our clients are using either Schwab or Fidelity, but it could be any company, and they're going to send a Form 5498 that's going to have your fair market value of the account as of December 31st of the prior year. So like in January of 2025, you would have got a 5498 for potentially in January. Sometimes they don't come out till like May, and that gets a lot of people confused.
Right.
But a 5498 that shows the December 31st balance, and there's a little box on there that will be checked if it says you have an RMD due, but it doesn't necessarily show you the amount. You have to know where to look.
Yep.
And so it's an easy one that can just trip people up because they might just kind of wing it and say, well, I'll look at my balance as of today.
Yes,
and take and do the calculation. Or I heard it's around 4%, so we'll just take 4%. Like Jeremy said, it starts there. It starts just a little bit lower at 3.77, but eventually it gets to where it's more than 4%, so that might not be sufficient.
Yep. And if you're just saying, oh, today's April 1st, let me go ahead and take it, you use the balance of that day, you could be overpaying, which the IRS isn't going to say, sorry, here's some money back.
Right.
But the worst thing is if you don't pay enough because the account balance was different on December 31st, wham, there's the 25% penalty again.
Yeah.
Yep.
All
a lot of whams going on.
I know, right? Big whammy, right? All right, trap number 4, failure to take your RMD from the proper account. We touched on this a little bit, but this is huge.
Yeah, I won't spend a lot of time rehashing it. Like Jeremy said, you can't aggregate between employer-based plans and IRAs. You can with an IRA. So with an IRA, if you had 5 IRAs, you would separately calculate the RMD for all 5, and then you could take all of it from one account. You could take it from 2 or 3. Any combination, you just have to have that total aggregate dollar amount distributed by December 31st. That doesn't count inherited IRAs, and it doesn't count a 401k. So that's just really important to be aware of.
Right, for sure. All right, trap number 5 is failure to calculate your life expectancy annually. This trips a lot of people up, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's why we want to be careful about saying that 4% kind of as a rule of thumb, because it does, like you mentioned, it's going to go up every year.
Because the longer we live, what happens?
Yeah, the
life expectancy
shortens, so that factor gets smaller or bigger or smaller and smaller.
Right.
But the idea is that you have to calculate that every year.
Yes.
And if you don't, then that's where you're going to run into some major problems.
Yeah, for sure. Well, as we wrap up this segment, let's just touch on trap number 6, and I'm sure it's a much more involved conversation. We can continue when we come back. But that's failure to handle RMDs from inherited IRAs properly. This is a huge one that trips a lot of people up as well.
Yeah, this one, I would say, like we've done a complete show on the Secure Act because this is what was changed the most. And this is why I say that IRAs have effectively been turned into growing, building, taking tax time bombs, because as you said earlier in the show, they've condensed that distribution period down from potentially 40, 50 years, like a Bill Belichick situation. His soon-to-be wife potentially would have like 61 years to take out her RMDs if she could stretch over her lifetime, whereas most beneficiaries, your next of kin, your children, right? 10 years and the full thing has to be cashed out. But what category do they fall in? Are they a non-designated beneficiary, a non-eligible designated beneficiary, or an eligible designated beneficiary? And there's some things that you may or may not do knowingly or not, that could impact how long that money is going to last, how much deferral they're going to receive, whether or not they have to start taking money out right away or not. It gets very, very complicated. But again, that's why the team here at Stonebridge, we're experienced advisors. We understand how these changes have been implemented. They just came out with the final regulations in July of 2024 for the Secure Act. We've got those, a copy of those in our office that we can show you when you come in. But the key thing here is to make sure that you have a plan and you're working with somebody who's a trusted ally who understands how the RMD system works. We would like to be that plan, that partner with you. Call the number at the bottom of your screen. Let's get started today.
Wonderful. Tim, Jeremy, thank you so much. To our viewers at home, that number to call is 866-256-7778. Or again, if you'd like to connect online, simply scan that QR code. That will take you to a landing page, ask you a few short, simple questions. And then a member of the team from Stonebridge Wealth Systems will reach out to connect with you to schedule your complimentary written financial plan that way as well. Stay with us. We've got more to cover on why you shouldn't try doing these RMDs on your own, but the good news is we have solutions for you right after this.
Our team is very unique, so we all have different gifts. You know, when you put it all together, it fits well.
Jeremy is definitely our most seasoned and fastest growing advisor we have. He's discerning, so he understands the way we want to do things at Stonebridge, to focus on the client and solving their problems, and that's really what he's passionate about.
I know Tim spends a lot of time making sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed for his clients. And he's not just satisfied knowing the 30,000-foot view, he wants to get down in the weeds and know exactly how it works.
The things that you buy, the stocks, the bonds, the mutual funds, that really isn't that important to the client. What's important to the client is, what does this mean for me? And at the end of the day, what it means is they can sit back and listen to the music. You know that you've got a team, not just one person, but an entire team behind you that's taking care of those things, so you can focus on what's important. As Americans, we strive for better. From a better house, to a better career, to a better life for our children and grandchildren. Better has become the American way. When it comes to your retirement, what does better mean to you? Does it mean more income, a flexible lifestyle, better solutions? A better retirement begins with a financial plan. To get your complimentary written financial plan, call the number you see here. You only retire once. This is your opportunity to plan for better.
Welcome back to the Retirement Compass, where today Tim and Jeremy and I have been discussing why you shouldn't try tackling your RMDs, those required minimum distributions, on your own, alone at home. We say don't try this at home. We just went over the 6 most common traps that folks fall into, which can cause them to inadvertently often get hit with penalties from the IRS. I know, Tim, we were talking during the break, you want to mention something else about trap number 6, which is failure to handle inherited IRAs properly.
So something called the at least as rapidly rule that IRS has implemented. Keep in mind, it took them 4.5 years to interpret the law that was passed in December of 2019 and come out with the final regulations. So there's still a lot of gray area here. We still don't have final regs from the Secure Act 2.0, but here's what we know so far. If RMDs have begun, so if the decedent, the person who owned the IRA that passes away, if they reach their required beginning date, 73 for folks today, right, or older. So if they were 73 or older, they'd reach their required beginning date, which, keep in mind, is April 1st of the year following the year they reach age 73. So not that they turned 73, that they had made it to at least April 1st of the following year. They have reached their required beginning date, which means RMDs have been turned on. The at least as rapidly rule means if you inherit money from that account, right, and it's an IRA, now it's an inherited IRA, and you're a child and you were listed as a beneficiary properly, so that way you have the 10-year rule, you still have to take RMDs right away. So you have to take your first RMD by December 31st of the year following the year of death, and the account then has to be cashed out 10 years later. So if they passed away in 2024, first RMD is due by the end of 2025. Account has to be zeroed out by December 31st of 2034. Again, just me saying that, I'm listening to it, I'm like,
I was too, and I was like, we
It's a
operate in this
maze.
world. It is a maze. And let alone the IRS rules that you read directly from the website or at the start of the
Yep.
show. It's enough to make anyone's head spin, for
Yep.
sure. Well, let's talk about some solutions here, because the bottom line is don't try to perform these RMD calculations on your own. They are incredibly horrific. What do you recommend folks do? Obviously, you monitor this for your clients, but also there's some strategies that folks can utilize with their RMDs to help them save on taxes, potentially, right?
Yeah, I mean, what should you do with your RMD? It's really what you want to do. But like Tim said earlier, a lot of people don't start planning for this until they're at that age. And so one thing that people can do to reduce those IRA account balances is gift money away. And if you're doing QCDs, qualified charitable donations, instead of taking an RMD, they could start doing that actually at 70 and a half. So they could start doing that even though they're not 73 yet, but they could start reducing the IRA balance.
And then when you hit RMD age, those QCDs can count as the RMD
Exactly.
if you want them
It
to,
does.
right?
It does. And we do that all the time for clients. And you don't have to give it to one charity. It could be multiple charities. So that's a good thing. The other thing that I wrote down in my notes, Kristen, it's your birthday this week. And so if anybody's feeling charitable, they could gift you $19,000 this year.
everyone in the world could.
Everybody could do that. Think of that. That would be amazing. And so it's really what do you want to do, but you have to have a plan. It's important to have a plan.
For sure.
That you can take step by step and walk through.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. Well, for people who need to take the RMDs but maybe don't need that money to live off of, some people do need it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you see both ends of that spectrum.
So this is one of those reasons why sometimes, people might wonder, like, Tim, you're recommending that I do a 401k rollover. I'm retired. You're saying, hey, take your money that's currently in the 401k, roll that to an IRA. Now, there's a lot of pros and cons. There's a lot of reasons to do that. And it's not just because you have more options, more flexibility, and more professional guidance. The QCDs Jeremy just told you about, you can't do them from a 401k. They're not allowed from a 401k. So I have a client who recently, she's very charitably inclined. She's got a nice government pension. She doesn't need the money. And she wants to do these large QCDs, but we already used a strategy to do a large Roth conversion. So she doesn't have any traditional IRA money left. She's got like 800,000, let's say, in the TSP, and she wants to do QCDs and she cannot, right? So you have to use the right tool for the right job. The team at Stonebridge knows how to implement these in a proper way to serve your purposes. Give us a call at the number at the bottom of the screen. We'll get started today.
Wonderful. Tim, Jeremy, thank you so much. To our viewers at home, we know that a lot of this might be new to you, and it definitely is confusing, but the good news is it's not new to Tim and Jeremy and the team of Stonebridge Wealth Systems, and they are here to help and serve you, but you have to reach out, and that number to call to do so is 866-256-7778, or again, you're welcome to scan that QR code. That will get you connected as well. Be safe, be happy, be blessed, and we look forward to being back with you next time here on the Retirement Compass.